We're learning from the former FBI Director Mueller, who's going to be sort of like this chief counsel in the whole mess to get to the bottom of the Russia-Trump ties. You know the whole score here, that he's a stickler for detail and a stickler for taking his time. So what's the fallout from that to Rasmussen political analyst Amy Holmes, the Wall Street Journal's Glenn Hall, and Rosecliff CEO managing partner Mike Murphy. Amy, a lot of time could mean in this city where it is often difficult to walk and chew gum at the same time, even though even I've tried it. It's not that tough. But that is going to delay action on this stuff.
It may, and two of my former colleagues from Senate Majority Bill Frist's office, Bill Hoagland and Rohit Kumar, were quoted in the New York Times as saying, look, the system cannot take it can only take so much pressure before things really start to slow down. But of course in Washington it's about political capital, and I think there are two forces working against each other, which is as this investigation saps political capital, it slows down legislation. But I would warn Republicans that passing legislation builds political capital. So I think they need to move forward, and we saw Speaker Paul Ryan saying that he intends to do so. You
know, Glenn, it apparently took Ronald Reagan 300 days from idea to execution to passage to get the second big tax cut, the big one, in '86 done. And he was a popular president. This one is not. He also had a coalition to work with. This one does not yet. It could change. What are you hearing?
Well, the challenges are great. He's got his first budget coming out due. He's got to work with Congress to get a budget through, and working on taxes at the same time with all of these other distractions around him. So I know Speaker Ryan is saying he's going to press ahead, and that's true. The legislative branch will continue, but the president's team also needs to get back on their message and focus driving the tax message home.
That is, if they have the oomph behind them to get it home, right?
That is the point here. But if you watch how the market has reacted to this, Neil, I think, after a big run-up to all-time highs, we had that sell-off yesterday that got a little bit nasty towards the end of the day. But I think really now today you're seeing the NASDAQ, the techs, the big leaders where there's growth starting to rebound up about 0.5%.
What if they don't get this? What if there's, we build in assumptions that we're going to get this by the end of the year. What if we don't?
If we don't, I think the market can begin to sell off. I think you're looking at then a 10%, possibly 15% correction in the market. So, but I look at it now and say that I think it's too early to make that assumption. Right now, I think we're going to get a rate hike in June. I think, as Glenn mentions, we're going to get the president and his team back on point. And if we get that, I think earnings have recovered enough.
I don't know. That might be elite.
You did see those tweets this morning, and that's a big danger.
But, the tweets haven't changed, really. The tweets have been there for
but does that
a
bother
year.
You, and I catch you in the morning a lot where he does get distracted. I don't mean that to disparage the president, but he gets in his own way.
For sure, and there's enough people shooting at him that he doesn't need any self-inflicted wounds.
Right.
And a lot of times these tweets have caused problems.
So if you had your
him.
druthers, you would say stop.
I would say slow it down. Okay. And really, if you're going to get a message out, you want to go over the media and get a message out to the masses, make it a positive message. Taking shots at people I don't think gets him anywhere. I think that belittles him.
My family didn't have that. We'd have nothing.
Okay.
Do you ever think, Amy, with this, that the problem the president is going to have, certainly bipartisanship seems like a leap, but he's going to have a problem with his own party, particularly in the Senate, where there isn't a lot of wiggle room, right? Mitch McConnell, who argues for keeping the revenue neutral, which he always has. So some people build into that, well, they can't be big tax cuts then.
Right.
Others like, John McCain, who've been saying this whole thing with Comey is like the scale of Watergate. I mean, there's not a lot of wiggle room in the Senate to bleed off more support.
Right, and I think we know politicians, and they're going to put their finger in the wind to see which way it's blowing, whether, it helps them in their re-election chances to be supportive of the president or to slow it down. And we saw that Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, was a bit pessimistic, actually, about moving forward on the tax agenda. But I wonder, Neil, if there wasn't some irrational exuberance when it comes to the stock market that they were betting on and banking on.
Well, they never gave it up. Even today, they reversed yesterday's big drop, right?
Absolutely, and I think there's still the hope out there. But one thing we haven't talked about yet is the health law still has to get through the Senate, and so that's a whole other bunch of political capital that's going to be spent. So that's where the bottleneck is going to be, because that 52 majority is not enough to get some of these big things through.
Do you think that was the crucible to die on? Because it looks like they're going to start from scratch in the Senate, right? And without even touching the tax thing. So
Yeah, that was a tough call, starting with health care.
I understand why.
Right? Absolutely.
But where does this leave the tax thing?
I think it takes a lot of the energy and momentum out of getting a tax reform done because they've got to get one or others of these finished. Health care is further along, but it's also a tougher battle in the Senate, as you said.
Right, and Neil, we have this conversation a lot, as the administration just got rolling, and Mr. Trump's own pollster, John McLaughlin, wrote a piece for the National Review before inauguration saying the Republicans, they should tackle economic issues, taxes, cutting taxes, to again build that political capital, build that momentum, do infrastructure to get bipartisan buy-in, and then tackle health care.
I think we're hearing a lot of the negatives here, but I think President Trump came into a really tough situation. And he came in saying he was going to go drain the swamp. He was going after Republicans and Democrats. So the fact that we're here in the economy, I'd like to point out, forget about the stock market for a second. I think the economy is showing some real signs of improved growth. Not the 2% and sub 2% we've seen over the last 8 years, but there's real signs of growth. We have housing starts out there.
Maybe we don't need tax cuts.
Well, I think...
Walmart is beating estimates. If Amazon's firing on all cylinders, industrial production surprises, maybe you could make an argument. I don't agree with that, but hey, what's the rush?
Well, I think to spur the economy a little bit more and to, as Paul Ryan mentioned yesterday, to rewrite a code that's been out there for 30-plus years, to simplify that, I think would help rich, poor, black, white,
well,
everybody.
Do any of you think that, if, for example, if it isn't done this year, it's next to impossible next year?
It gets harder when you've got midterms in there. It's a tough fight right now. How do you bring that message back home to your district in a hard-fought election battle? It gets very much more difficult.
But on the good news side, we're seeing regulatory reform, which is obviously a great spur to the economy and something I think that people are cheering.
Do any of you worry, though, that part of that was built into this is expectation that Trump will stabilize? I talked to a prominent Democrat who said, Neil, we don't want to go rushing on this because the prospect of a President Pence could complicate things for us. Isn't that crazy?
I don't see that being the complication, but I think that's getting way ahead of this, right? The president,
because I think some Republicans want that.
It's hard to go there.
I don't think any Republicans want an impeached president. Let's face it. I mean, that would be a political disaster.
I think his view was that the sooner it happens, God forbid it happens, the better, rather than having it happen right before the midterms.
I think we're getting into telenovela territory. We're just making up stories.
I think it's a little too early to be going down that road. I think if you look at this judge, forget.
I think Democrats are jumping the gun on this, and it's looking a looking obvious. Especially, didn't they do some polling on how impeachment would make them look?
Right.
Not how the country would do, how they would look.
Yeah, McClatchy just reported that they're putting together focus groups to find out, will impeachment be good or bad for the Democratic Party?
Well, I feel as if they've been trying to scalp President Trump from the beginning, and now this really caught some traction. People seem to have latched on to this, the Comey event, that is, and now they're running with it. And you see,
don't even get me started on those journal guys. Right?
Well, the challenge right here is you've got all of these investigations going on, and they're going to continue, and they're going to be there for a long time to come. Yet at this point, we have not seen any charges brought forward, right, to anyone so far. So I think
think of this, though. The Mueller appointment wasn't even run by Jeff Sessions or the president. What does that tell you?
Well, Jeff Sessions was recused, so he couldn't be involved.
I understand, but that's a little...
I think Rod Rosenstein felt like the politics had gotten too far. The agency and the DOJ and the FBI were going to have reputational damage, and he felt he had to do something.
Yeah, we'll see. Guys, thank you very, very much.